Tens of thousands of Lebanese have taken to the streets for their second massive anti-American march in the last few days. Organized by Hezbollah's leader, experts say the undertones are increasingly political rather than religious, in a challenge to America's regional clout. With more on the rally in Lebanon, as well as other Islamic demonstrations all over the world, here's RT's Paul Slayer.
Tens of thousands of protesters have taken to the southern Lebanese city of Tyre. This is in line with a call that went out earlier by the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, where he called for his supporters to show their anger in their fists, in their shouts and in their faces. He says that this film is the worst attack ever on Islam. Now, so far the demonstration is peaceful. It follows a demonstration on Monday in which more than 100,000 Hezbollah supporters took to the southern suburbs of Beirut. Now, Nasrallah has called for staggered protests throughout this week. We understand that the next protest will be on Friday in the eastern Lebanese city of Baalbek. But at the same time, we are hearing reports of an American food chain, KFC, that for the second time has been attacked in Lebanon. Now, this comes on Wednesday as clashes erupt here between Palestinian protesters and Israeli security forces. At least 20 people were injured when the clashes erupted near a border crossing in East Jerusalem. The protesters threw fire bombs as well as stones at the security forces. They responded with tear gas and rubber bullets. We're also seeing again protests in the Pakistani city of Karachi. Here, hundreds of protesters have stormed a barricade around the U.S. consulate building. We're seeing the same kind of banners, the same kind of anti-American rhetoric, most of it focusing on calls for the American ambassador to Pakistan to be expelled. Now, hundreds of protesters also took to the Indonesian city of Medan. Here they are calling for the United States to be punished for allowing such a movie to be made. Also on Wednesday, there's a lot of attention focused on Paris, where a weekly newspaper by the name of Charlie Hebdo has published crude caricatures of Prophet Muhammad. We understand that some of them are showing him naked. Now, this has sparked a fierce debate over the whole issue of freedom of speech, with the French foreign minister saying that there will be consequences regarding this publication, and he has condemned these caricatures being published in the first place. But we are hearing from the French Prime Minister that freedom of speech is something that is protected, although something that needs to be used responsibly. Nonetheless, Muslims in this country have been organizing themselves for a protest. So far, that protest has been banned, but it is likely to go ahead. We know also that they believe that this is a calculated move and that it has nothing to do with freedom of speech. French police have positioned themselves outside the headquarters of this magazine. It's a magazine that was firebombed last year when it published an edition that mocked radical Islam. At the same time, at least 20 French embassies are on lockdown around the world for fear that there will be reprisal and revenge attacks.
For more on the controversial publication in France and the resonance in the Muslim world, let's join journalist and writer Barry Lando from Paris. Barry, thank you for being with RT today. Printing such provocative satire after massive deadly protests over an Islam-mocking film, is that some kind of a desperate act for publicity?
I suppose their motives are mixed. I'm sure publicity has something to do with it. Definitely, their circulation has gone up every time they've done it, and so they've risked firebombing, but they've gotten a lot of money by doing it. The French are no different than any other newspapers in England and New York who do the same kind of thing. But as far as the question of no limits on freedom of speech, not just in France, but in Europe as a whole, I've been looking at the laws across Europe, and in fact, there are limits on freedom of speech, and those limits deal directly in many countries, for instance, in Germany and the Netherlands, in France as well, with any kind of publication or communication, which I'm quoting the German law now, which would incite hatred against segments of the population or assault human dignity of others by insulting, maliciously maligning, or defaming segments of the population. In Germany, you're punished from 3 months to 5 years for publishing such a thing. Also, you probably know denying the Holocaust is a crime in most European countries, not in the United Kingdom, but certainly in France and Germany.
Barry, I want to draw your attention to something. Now, the French Prime Minister says the publication is an issue of freedom of expression. Now, just yesterday, provocative photos of the British royalty were banned from press. Why weren't they defended in the same way? I
agree. I think it's hypocritical and doesn't really stand up to examination.
Now, you did mention freedom of speech, and it certainly is an admirable concept. But now France has shut down its embassies and schools abroad, fearing a backlash over this cartoon.
Let me finish with, if I could, with what I was saying. I think it's very important that on the question of Holocaust denial, which is not permitted in Europe, and I would argue that Holocaust denial is very similar to attacking one's religion in the case of Judaism. So, in fact, there are limits on it.
Now, the scope of outrage throughout the Muslim world certainly is huge. Dozens of states are seeing both peaceful and violent protests. Now, this certainly can't just be about a film or a cartoon, however mocking it is, can it?
No, of course. It's just an excuse for the release of a lot of hatreds that have been built up over decades. And as one has put it, it's kind of the last drop in a cup of animosity towards the United States and to other countries which has been filling over the years. And it goes back for 50 years into the history of the United States and that part of the world. This is just an excuse, if you will, for some groups to make use of that hatred and to set it aflame.
All right, live from Paris, joining RT journalist and writer Barry Lando. Thank you for your time.
Pleasure.